So today we're going to talk about all the books I read in January. If I am stumbling a bit, I'm so sorry. My words are like all tangled up, haven't filmed in a couple of weeks, and also I'm just getting over a cold, so my voice is a little bit raspy. The first book that I finished in January was Ken Follett's Fall of Giants. This follows a cast of characters circling World War I, and I loved this story. There is a couple in this book and you get to follow their stories from either side, and it's this like drawn out love. I guess it's kind of a fast love story at first, but then it gets like drawn out and it's like, I think, really romantic, and I totally fell for these two as like, I was just so happy for them. I loved them. There are a couple of very like morally gray characters. One of them is like, I just want him to do the right thing. The other one, I just don't like him at all. Ugh, he made my skin crawl. He was a weirdo. I did not like him. The other characters I liked, but there was obviously certain ones that are just like, you get characters that are just your favorite ones. But this story, if you love Downton Abbey and historical fiction, like this is like Downton Abbey in a book. I don't know if Downton Abbey is a book. I think it's just a TV show. But this gave me serious Downton Abbey vibes. I loved it. I thought it was super great. Definitely recommend. Can't wait to read the second one. Gave this one 5 stars. The second book I read in January is The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. I am not super familiar with the fantasy world. Growing up, was not, I don't really want to like make my mom sound bad, but like she didn't let us read fantastical stories really. She was kind of against like all the, I completely missed like the Harry Potter era, all that kind of fantasy stuff. Just wasn't stuff that we were really allowed to read, and then I never really developed a taste for it when I was old enough to like sneak books on my own. I read a lot more hard-hitting contemporary kind of stuff, like really sad stories and angsty stories and stuff like that. So as an adult, I honestly haven't even thought about fantasy until about 5 years ago. I started reading the Game of Thrones series, or A Song of Ice and Fire, whatever it's called. And since I started reading that, I've definitely had more of an open mind to fantasy, but I just didn't know where to go. It's a very vast world, and I feel like you could pick up a book and hate it, or you could pick up a book and love it. Anyway, upon joining BookTube, I came across Murphy Napier and Elliot Brooks' channels, and they both highly recommended the Mistborn series, and after a while, I was like, I need to get my hands on that. I need to know what it's all about. So getting into the first book of the Mistborn series, I love it. I absolutely adored this story. I loved the characters. I loved the friendship group. I just thought the entire story was really great. I was very entertained the entire time. Just loved everything. Essentially, this is about a group of like thieves who need to take down the bad guy who rules their land. I don't really want to say too much because I feel like this is like the best kept secret. It wasn't spoiled for me, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone else. Keep an eye out in a couple of months though, because when I do finish the series, I'm going to have an entire video of my thoughts on each book throughout the series and just do a big wrap up on just these, so that anybody who wants to talk Mistborn can just like flood the comment section with spoilers without ruining it for anyone else in these videos. But I also gave this one 5 stars. Loved it, loved it, loved it. Cannot wait to get to the second one of this in February. The third and final 5-star book of the month. I know, it sounds like I just like sprinkle 5 stars out. I do. If I love the book, I'm not afraid to give it a 5 star. This is Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys. I don't really know how to sound her name. I've heard it a few different ways. I don't know how to say it. Anyway, this follows 4 different characters during the end of World War II, and it just broke my heart. It absolutely broke my heart. I have an entire book talk on this, so if you want to hear my thoughts on like more in depth, or my thoughts in more depth, keep an eye out for that. It should be up very soon. But you follow 4 characters, and I thought it was going to be 4 different stories that converge at the end, like 4 separate storylines. You have 2 storylines, and one of them has 3 separate perspectives. And I thought that was going to be a little bit awkward and clunky to read through, but I fell into it really quickly, and I actually think that was interesting because there was sort of a language barrier between the 3, because they all had different native languages and were kind of getting the point across in the best way that they could. I loved Florian. I loved Juana. I loved the Shoe Poet. There were so many great lines in this book. And again, this is another one I didn't really, this is a book, I didn't really annotate any of these. I didn't annotate this one because it's not my book. I didn't annotate this one because I just wanted to experience the story, and I figure if I read it a second time, then I'll get into it. And same with this one. I was just so immersed in the story that I wasn't taking the time. I only put in 3 flags in the whole book, and I think there were a lot of lines in this story that I would like to go back and find and note later. Sometimes I get really into annotating a book, and then sometimes I just get really into the book and I don't want anything to distract me. Doesn't mean I loved a book more or less, just sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. But I absolutely loved Salt to the Sea. I thought the story was beautiful. It made me cry, which is always a good sign of a good book because it just shredded my heart, ripped it out. I loved the characters. I felt for them. There's a character that, like, I just hated vehemently in this story. He's just such, like, a sociopathic POS. Like, I just, hated his character so much. He was disgusting. He made me want to vomit. But I definitely, if you like historical fiction and books that make you cry, I would definitely recommend this one. Very good. Now, getting into this one, and honestly, I can't remember where we ended up. I think I averaged each chapter and we ended up at like 2.7 stars, but I gave it 2 stars on Goodreads, I believe. Now, this book, I felt so bad. One of my really, really good friends, I will link her Instagram down below, The Percolated Bookworm. My friend Ashley wanted me to read this. She said it's like one of her favorite books. And most of the time when we read a book, like, we are right on the same page, and for some reason, I just couldn't connect with this one. I felt like the first 3 chapters were really interesting. I liked the different perspective of Anna, the little girl in the story. I liked how open-minded she was, and like just the different, it kind of gave me like the Shack vibes, if you've ever read The Shack, where it kind of makes you not, like, I wasn't questioning my faith, but it made me question the way that people view certain things and like different angles to look at stuff. I thought that was very, very interesting, and I can definitely see why people would like this book. That being said, after about the 3rd chapter, it got very, like, mathematically driven, and my brain just, like, could not compute. I am not a mathematical-minded person. There were certain things they were explaining, and I just couldn't picture it in my head, so they didn't really make sense. And then I felt like each chapter had the same formula of, this is how a regular person sees it, and then Anna says you're wrong, and then you must question Anna about why you were wrong, and then she'll explain her right way of thinking. And to me, it just kind of kept doing that same formula, and so I just kept wanting to get to the point just so I could get through it. This book actually took me almost a week to read, and it's only 183 pages, so I just couldn't really sink into this story. I was having the hardest time getting through it, but I do think there are some interesting points made. I just didn't connect with this one, and I'm so sorry, Ashley. I wanted to like it. I hate not liking books. Like, if you guys know me by now, you know that when I don't like a book, I'm genuinely disappointed. Like, I just, it gets so sad when I don't like a book. And then last but not least, I did not complete this one, but I did start A Game of Thrones, and this is a reread. So I'm actually going through and I'm annotating it this time. I actually think I'm loving this story even more the second time, and my reasoning for that is I think the first time I read it, it was all discovery. It was all reading the story. I was kind of comparing it with the show because I'd already seen the show, but I was reading through the story, comparing what was the same, what was different. Honestly, this book is pretty much exactly the same as the show for the first part. But I felt like it was just discovery, and I was just reading it, and I got through the entire series that's out right now. And I decided, I've never reread a book in my life, but I was going to restart this because Murphy Napier has started reading this series, and I really wanted to refresh my mind so that I could, like, chat with her in her comment section and, like, kind of connect with her thoughts versus fresh thoughts instead of, like, 5-year-old memories of what I had once read. So I'm actually really glad because I've never reread a book before in my life. Not once have I reread like a chapter book. I just haven't done it. But I'm actually really glad I started with this. I plan on rereading the entire series that is finished this far throughout the year. I'm hoping I can do it, but we'll see. It might take me a couple years to get through around all the other books that I'm reading. But I am thoroughly enjoying myself. I have written so many notes. I put a whole bunch of like tabs at the back to write down like big events that happened in the book, sort of like my own Spark Notes version of this story. And I actually love these paperbacks because these ones are really floppy for a trade paperback. Like the pages are nice and skinny and it's floppy and it just feels good and I just love it. Anyway, that is everything that I read in January. I think it was a great reading month. I can't remember the total number of pages that I read, but I will like stick it up here somewhere beside me because I feel like it was quite a few. And I will talk to you all soon. Don't forget to comment and subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any future videos. And I will talk to you all soon. Bye! My heart